Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon.
Feel free to come off mute. Let us hear your voices.
Everybody's muted.
We have to encourage them to unmute and show their face from time to time.
Right, they're hiding. They're hiding.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
There we go. That's the way we're supposed to do it. Hey, now, guys, you know how we do it on Wednesday nights. We would love to hear something positive. So does anybody have anything that they love to share that went positive for them here recently, last week? It could be academics, it can be life, but give us some positive energy tonight, something that happened positive for you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle, and something positive that happened was that my sister graduated from high school, and she will be attending Northwestern University.
Excellent.
Congrats to her.
Very good. I'll share something, Brian. We just closed out our summer camp with our alliance, and it went well, both camps, our math boot camp and our summer camp with our students, and they both went really well. And the students really had good feedback on the camp. And I think one of them is interested, we did a tour the last day. So one is interested in doing an internship to where the area that we toured. So that's always good.
Awesome. That's great. Both of those are great. Come on, let's get one more. We'll go lucky number 3 here.
I'll go ahead and share. I finished my first week of research with Dr. Fackenthal on Friday, and so it went really well. I learned a lot already, and I'm really happy that the research students that are with me are very kind and supportive.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing. Thank you all for sharing. We'll go through a little bit of housekeeping like we always do, and then we'll turn it over so you guys could maximize the time here. So a little bit of housekeeping, guys. We want to hear your voices. We want your energy. We want your feedback. So feel free to use the Q&A feature. We'll keep our eye on that tonight. You got the chat box. You have the ability to raise your hand at any time. We do have a different format tonight, as we will have it panel style, but that doesn't remove you from being able to engage with us through your dialogue and your questions. Dr. Williams will do a really good job of kind of balancing the engagement with you along with the information that will be shared by our panelists tonight. As I always say, please bring the energy. We know we have wonderful guests. They're going to bring it tonight for us. I thank them in advance for sacrificing their time, and I thank you for sacrificing your time as well here on a Wednesday night. To not waste any more time, you guys had a wonderful session, first session on this topic of racism and STEM, and we knew that we needed more. So Deb and the team did a wonderful job of planning this out. And so this is session number 2. So it's a continuation of our dialogue from before. If you did not attend the first session, this is not gonna, you don't have to feel behind. But what I do recommend is after this session, please do go back to the resource library, and Deb will put the link to that library of videos inside of the chat box for you. Dr. Williams, your show.
Thank you. Good evening. Through virtual, we always try to give the extra energy. Thank you all for being here with us. We're excited for part 2 of the 3-part series of racism and STEM. Just like Brian mentioned before, the first session was really beneficial. I got a lot of good feedback and even questions that I incorporated into our panel's discussion for tonight. So I don't want to hold us too much longer, but I will say that the last session is a great opportunity opportunity. It's allyism in STEM, in terms of racism in STEM. So we want to make sure that you all are able to attend that. I believe it's June 30th. So it's the end of this month. I know that Deb will send out a link for it, but if you are interested in just learning more about allyship and ways to navigate that space, we've kind of talked about what racism is, the impacts, how it impacts us internally, externally, navigating the journey of STEM. Tonight, we're going to hear the stories of some dynamic leaders in STEM, you know, some faculty, students, people that are in the work sector, to be able to hear their stories and navigate that. I'm excited for you all to be able to ask questions. I know the last time you all ended up sending me a lot of questions because we didn't have a lot of time to answer all of your questions. So tonight, my goal is to just weave those questions in and out with our participants. We have about 9 questions that we want to ask them, but we will interact with each of you all's questions throughout those times. And then again, the last session is on the 30th. And if you're just interested in trying to figure out how to navigate racism on your campus, within your student population, within the classroom, as a faculty, myself and a few other colleagues will be taking on that charge on the next final session. So again, you're more than welcome to come. I'm going to, first I'd like to thank our panel, you know, because they took time to be with us this evening, and I really count it a privilege to have them here. And I've heard a lot of their stories before, and so I think it's going to be beneficial for us tonight. Before we get started, I'll have them introduce themselves, just say your name, the field of STEM that you're in, and you know why you feel like this conversation is important. And I'll be monitoring the chat. And you guys can, I don't know if you're able to take off mute, you can chime in.
I'll start. This is Jay Pitts here. I'm involved in the science, specifically the biology fields. I operate a clinical research company here in Columbus, Georgia. So I think STEM's important because we have to do a better job of bringing more people of color to the sciences, to technologies, engineering, and mathematics. Is severely lacking, and I love the conversation that we're doing to help address that.
Hi everyone, my name is Naoka Little Jackson. I'm a third-year PhD student in biochemistry and molecular biology at Howard College of Medicine. And I believe this conversation is really important because as my undergrad experience and throughout grad school, I wish that a lot of the universities had these conversations, because for majority of I can reflect on my own personal journey is that I felt kind of isolated. So I think it is a really good stepping stone to a good direction to include more African-American students in the sciences.
Hi, my name is Cheyenne. I am a senior at UW Milwaukee studying geophysics, conservation, environmental science, and biology. I really like these discussions and these series because you see racism in pretty much everywhere, whether it be in academics, research, or if you go on to work in the field, like in jobs, and sometimes we don't always have these discussions in those settings. So having a place where we can all come together and kind of discuss issues that we're seeing, how to handle them, our experiences, it's a nice safe space for all of us to kind of, vent and learn a little bit more about how to handle it. So yeah.
I guess I can go next. My name is Omar. I'm a civil engineering student, and I agree with Cheyenne. These types of talks and discussions are very important, especially when you're offered an opportunity in like an internship or a job outside of school. You get to deal with a lot of people, and sometimes racism is everywhere. And, even if racism is hidden throughout jokes and stuff like that, you need to learn how to handle with these type of things. So.
Thank you, Omar. And I'll just ask for our panelists to remain unmuted so that you all can just kind of navigate and answer questions throughout. We'll go ahead to the final 2 panelists, Dr. Jackson and Dr. Frazier.
So I'm Dr. Monica Frazier, and I am chair of the biology department at Columbus State University, as well as director of the Southwest Georgia LSAMP Alliance. And I definitely think these conversations are important, not just for the students, but for faculty as well, so that you can see that that struggle continues even as a faculty member, even as you move upwards and onwards. Sometimes I think you feel as though as a minority, you finally made it. And I think it's going to be interesting. And I am excited about the questions so that you can see how that struggle continues and how, as a faculty member or someone who quote unquote made it, is advocating for those behind them as well as for themselves simultaneously.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, I'm Floyd Jackson. I'm department chair here at Columbus State University, chair of the Department of Chemistry. I'm also the interim chair of the Department of Earth and Space Sciences. So why do I think these conversations are important? Well, as I teach my, say, general chemistry class, I tell them that the driving force for the stock market is chemistry, but if you don't know anything about it, you're going to be left out. You need to know something about it. You need to know something about the racism. A lot of money is involved. And if we're not at the table, a lot of decisions are going to be made and we will be left out. So we need to prepare ourselves and know what to expect, and so that we'll know how to deal with the issues that confront us in regards to race and racism.
Excellent. So this is our dynamic panel. Again, if anybody has questions throughout, please just chime them in the chat. My eye is on the chat. I got the link pulled up here. We're going to start with our first question to the panel. What has been your experience with racism in STEM as a minority?
I can start off. So my experience with racism actually began when I was in high school. So I went to a really well-known and established high school in Fresno, California. It's called University High School. They only select a handful of students every year to attend the high school due to like the I guess like the positive advantages that come with going to that school. It's located on the Fresno State University campus, so you're able to take college level classes while being in high school. And so I was one of the very few students in kind of like the neighborhood I resided in to be selected to go basically across the city to go to this nice high school. And so when I first got there, I really wasn't eager to go, but I went anyways because of the education and the rigor. But now all throughout high school, I experienced a lot of different racial incidents with other students and me. I was picked on a lot of the times. I was bullied because of my skin complexion. There was always a joke that had some hidden agenda or ways to make me feel excluded. And even just like in general, when I was trying to like study in classes and stuff, I was always excluded from study groups. And so I've always found myself eating lunch by myself or studying by myself. But now I say all of this because it also influenced kind of the environment that I was also around. So that means the administrators too were kind of on the same agenda as much as the students, because a lot of things happen and kind of were like swept under the rug. But yeah, my counselor, I remember it was my senior year of high school, and she called me into the office and she asked me like, hey, what schools are you applying to? I had a whole list of, four-year universities I wanted to apply to. Now, I will say my GPA wasn't high because I was taking college classes since freshman year. I was like only 14. So those initial college classes that I took, I was actually failing. Science classes, I was failing. I was one of the only Black students in my entire graduating class. There was about 100 of us and there was only 5 Black students. The other 4 Black students had way more, they basically had a friend group. I didn't have a friend group. I kind of felt very isolated, but I didn't let it deter me from still staying at the university. But anyway, so I struggled a lot during my science classes. I had a lot of different, and that's usually actually where the most racial incidents happen, is actually in my science classes, and it kind of got swept under the rug by my teachers. So I kind of knew it was something that I couldn't actually fight just one student. It would have to be like, you know, a board or something. And so anyways, I'm talking to my counselor, and I'm telling her all my list of colleges that I would like to apply to. And she basically tells me that those universities are a long shot for me, that with my GPA and all my thing, like even though I was very involved in orchestra, band, and all of this, I wasn't qualified enough to apply to any four-year universities, and I should look at community colleges. Nothing is wrong with going to community college at all whatsoever. But the fact that she just kind of eliminated the possibility of me ever applying to four-year universities what made my mom upset, because my mom is an equity coordinator, so she deals with this on a constant basis of you know, with students feeling like they're not adequate to apply to universities because of people like her, the counselors and teachers that are telling our African American students or minority students that they can't apply. So she also then recommended that I look at another field besides the sciences. I was super passionate about the sciences since the 8th grade. I was doing internships and stuff like that, but she's like, no, I think you should look at somewhere else. I come home, I tell my mom this, and my mom tells me to do completely the opposite. I applied to like, I believe like 50 four-year universities, most of them HBCUs, and I pretty much got every single one of them. And she was flabbergasted. And to this day, I still believe that like those moments are what really fueled me to be where I am today. Because if I would have listened to her back in high school, I probably would have never been in the predicament I am now of a PhD in biochemistry, which is one of the hardest sciences. So yeah, racism is a big issue, and it stems from even when we're little kids. So just know that there's other people out there that experienced it all over. You're not the only one.
Excellent. Cheyenne?
Yeah, I would totally 100% agree. When I was thinking about that question, I think you're right. It does start when we're little, even elementary school. This seed is planted that these spaces aren't for us. And as we climb this academic ladder, you know, we are shy or maybe, you know, like hesitant to kind of do research or ask about opportunities, because ever since we were little, we were taught these spaces aren't for us, that we're not smart enough, or sometimes we can't afford it, you know, like all those negative connotations like that come along with this. But yeah, I would also agree that my own background, I went to predominantly white elementary school, high school. I was probably one out of four, maybe minority families. I would probably say four families is kind of a stretch. And yeah, it's really hard, especially when I also had the same experience in my science classes. I was experiencing a lot of the same racial, like negative put downs. And it's hard to bring it to administrators or white teachers, and they don't really understand. You know, they think you're being dramatic or kind of making it up, or just, you know, let it go. And it's hard to let it go when you hear these things over and over and over. And, you know, white administrators, white teachers, they don't understand, you know, they'll just brush it off. Like they're just being a bully. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily, like, yes, they are a bully, but these racial undertones, it's an issue, and it impacts us and traumatizes us for years to come. And we carry that with us in our educational settings. I remember coming to UW-Milwaukee and being a freshman, and I finished my conservation degree, and I didn't question anything. You know, I was quiet. I tried to be invisible in this setting. I had never dreamed of doing research. I thought it wasn't for me. I was too afraid to address my professors or even raise my hand in class because of this trauma that we have as we go through these educational levels. So yeah, you know, you're right. It does start at a very young age, and just snowballs as we get older.
I hear you say, you know, invisible, or that you were the only, but on this panel, we have 3 representatives that are representing HBCUs, right? So historically Black colleges or universities. And oftentimes a lot of students go to the STEMs or go to different institutions within the HBCU world because they want to be seen. and they don't want to be invisible. Talk, for those that are affiliated with an HBCU experience, talk to me about, or talk to the group about how that was impactful during your STEM journey and why that was beneficial.
I'll jump in on that one. So I attended Alabama State University and majored in chemistry as an undergraduate. And so for me, the HBCU experience actually gave me a sense of identity and confidence in who I was as a Black scientist. And that was partially a lot because I was surrounded by Black scientists or minority scientists in general. They looked like me. They were doing some awesome things. And, you know, we talk about a sense of belonging, but I didn't just belong, I was in a family. And they meant that I was going to do well, you know. And so that was, for me, that was great. Another thing about the HBCU experience is what came with it were numerous opportunities for internship and research experiences, because these companies or places that are looking for minorities, where do you find them? At a HBCU, if you want a large number. Not to say that minorities don't exist at other institutions, they do, but it's just that you have this huge concentration of minority people, and so they all have a tendency to flock there. So you have a ton of opportunities, and while I was there, it was nothing for me to travel, go to research conferences, not just little bitty conferences, but some actually big conferences, present work. It was just expected. That was just something you just did. I thought everybody did that, because my experience at the HBCU was everybody had a research experience, everybody traveled to do that. It was just simply an expectation. And so, of course, that allowed me an opportunity to really network with a lot of other minorities who looked like me, who was in this field. And I'm happy to say that because of that experience, I actually got my first publication as an undergrad, which is huge because that's not something you normally get, but I did, you know. And one of the internships I landed, that was one of my favorite ones, was with the National Institutes of Health, working with the National Cancer Institute. That was awesome for me. But, you know, like I said, being at an HBCU, those opportunities are numerous. They're abundant because people are looking for minorities, and that's usually where they go.
Awesome.
Let me add to that. I totally agree with Dr. Frazier. I have a similar experience. I started off, and I know Jay will probably laugh at me when I say I started college as a football player at a small, predominantly white institution. And you had some camaraderie among the athletes, but it wasn't there at the rest of the school. But then once I stopped and I transferred to Benedict College, the camaraderie was there. Not just in chemistry. I majored in chemistry. There was just so much camaraderie. We pushed one another. We challenged one another. All of us, we had the same goals. We just wanted to succeed. My mentor, he was actually a graduate from Howard University. And I had another professor who was a visiting professor from Atlanta University. So I had all of this mentorship, and even in other disciplines such as English. I had this one lady. She was like a Maya Angelou to me. I mean, she was just awesome. I mean, you can't get that experience from anywhere else. And even some of the other professors that were not, say African American, many of them at some of the HBCUs, they are actually there because some of them, they really want to be there, and they'll try their best to help you as much as they can. In fact, the first professor that approached me was a mathematics professor, and he wanted me he was mathematics and computer science. He wanted me to come in and work with him as an undergraduate student, but my mentor grabbed me first and gave me a job in the lab working conducting research. And like Dr. Frazier, that's when I got my very first publication as an undergraduate. And the work that we did, it was being sought out and requested by people from all over the world. It was just a great experience going from Benedict, then going to Howard, and then after leaving Howard from graduate school, teaching at Hampton University. It's just been just an awesome experience, having people around you that have the same goals that you have, just wanting to succeed.
Excellent. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit, so I'm kind of going to go out of order just to make sure we get to as many questions as we can. We have two wonderful faculty that are with us this evening, and they are both in very high positions. So I know that we are strategic in communication, but they will talk about, their route within STEM. My question to them is, they have seen working at PWIs or working at HBCUs, there's some practices that may be racist, or some practices that may be unbiased or biased towards different types of students and different backgrounds. What are some racist practices that you've experienced, and how have you navigated that? Remember our time, Dr.
You want to go? I was going to say, did you want to go first? But I can go
Floyd.
first. So some of the things that you'll see. So when you're a faculty member, you have to do service. There are three things you have to focus on: your teaching, your research, and your service are the three areas, and they use those areas to determine whether or not you get promoted or tenured as a faculty member. And so oftentimes for service, that means you have to do a lot of committee work. And one of the things that you'll see a lot is that anytime there's any sort of a committee that's revolving around disparities or identities or anything, and you're that Black faculty, oh, you're getting called. That's on you. You're getting that one. Then the other thing is, like, when you're doing interviews, whether you're interviewing a new faculty member or a staff member or whatever it is the interview is, there's usually always a question about disparity or, equity or race or something. And so usually they'll say, oh, well, we're going to see which question do you want to answer. If you don't say anything, you're going to get that question. They're not going to give it to somebody that's not a minority. So what I usually do is I usually am the first one to jump in and say, well, I'll do this question and this question. That way, that question about disparity is left for somebody else to answer, because I'm not answering it. Let somebody else do that. And then one of the last things I want to talk about too is data. We're always using data for different things to determine our effectiveness and what we need to do next. And so a lot of times you'll have this data and they'll collect data and say, oh, we got this many, males versus females. We've got this many students that are first gen students, or this many students receiving Pell Grants or what have you. But what you may or may not see is that data about the minority kids. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. I remember just in my own experience, I asked the department once, I said, hey, so what does our, what do we look like as a department, minority versus non-minority? And I'll never forget they had me and said, oh, I don't know. We don't have that data. And it's like, what, you just didn't even bother to collect it? And then for the ones that do collect it, for instance, if you're looking at data in terms of how well minority students are performing versus non-minority, they'll see that the data shows that the minority kids aren't passing the classes like the non-minority kids. And so you're sitting there like, okay, how do we address this? And oftentimes the first response is something related to lowering the standards. Well, maybe we need to not be as aggressive. Maybe we need to not, have our GPA so high. Maybe we need to lower our GPAs. That way we can increase the number of minorities that, do whatever, or maybe that we can increase the number of students that pass. And one of my questions is always, well, why don't you increase your standards and help them pass the class? Because obviously it's something about you or something that we're doing that's not happening. So why don't you up your standards and look for something else? Why do we always have to lower it just to increase? So those are just some things that I've seen as a faculty member that you may not notice or even be aware of as a student that's going on behind the scenes in that. And as a student, you're sitting there like, all right, they lowered the GPA so I can get in. And that's not what you want.
Okay, let me add a little bit to it. Dr. Frazier, that is so on point. When I first started here at CSU back in 1997, I was the only African-American male on campus with a PhD. And boy, they had me on every committee you could think of. I mean, if they needed someone, they were searching me out to put me on that committee. I was on some committees that I actually should not have been on it because it was like a conflict of interest, not having tenure, but they said, we got to have somebody, let's put him on it. But I hung around. And actually, I have actually been here longer than any male African-American has ever been here. No one has lasted longer than about 3 years, I guess, male. Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying about that. Now, my experience, I guess, with any type of, I guess, racist connotation or something, probably happened when I was back at Hampton University, but it wasn't on Hampton's campus or had anything to do with Hampton. It actually had to do with serving on a committee that is the American Chemical Society. And in that region, we had the local section, which involved ODU, Old Dominion, Christopher Newport, Norfolk State, who else? William and Mary, and Hampton, of course, and a couple of other community colleges. And somehow I got elected to serve as, I was chair-elect, then I got elected as chair of the local section. And I guess the faculty members who had pretty much run the whole show were faculty members at Old Dominion. I mean, they ran they were the treasurers, they were the secretaries. And when I became the chair, everybody pretty much quit. I couldn't get any help. I was like, what is going on? And I had never been a president or chair of anything, So I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Why won't anybody help? I never got any help from anybody. It was awful. That was the worst experience. I never could figure that one out. So you might run into something like that. You just have to be prepared to do what you need to do to make sure the job gets done. Now, here at CSU has been a very interesting, I guess, journey. When I first started, I would have some students would actually leave class on the first day. I would walk in and they'd see me standing up front, and well, I'm older now. I'm like ancient now, but I was a little younger then. So, and I looked like the students then. So, students, they would chatter and wonder if I'm, say, instructional technology there to, fix something, but I was standing there and they would be whispering, and I could hear them whispering, wondering, who is he? Who is that? They get up and leave. They say, if he's, and I quote you, if he's the professor for this class, I'm not staying, I'm leaving. And they get up and walk out. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. But I guess I've put in my time now, and everyone knows me now since I'm chair of 2 departments. So I'm well known on campus, so I don't get that anymore. But yeah, that was something that I never forget. And I understand why other, say, African Americans would not stay here, because they just were not going to put up with it. But I'm kind of stubborn, and I'm not, and no one's going to run me away from anything, because I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Jay, I'm gonna shoot this question to you. You know, when you hear the faculty point of view and you understand, you know, where they're coming from, hearing their personal and professional side of it, as minority students, you know, you come into a classroom, sometimes you're the only, if you go to HBCU, you're surrounded by a majority, but, you know, what do you think minority students should do to prepare themselves to deal with, you know, racism, you know, as they achieve their goals within STEM?
Oh, excellent question. I'll say first and foremost, when you do walk into that classroom setting, it sucks. It's the worst. But there are several things that I know that I recommend. I say the first one is you definitely want to find a good mentor. And I am very, very, very fortunate that my mentor is, I'm sharing the panel with her today, Dr. Frazier. Very blessed and honored to be able to say that. But you need to find someone that you not only can relate to, someone who encourages you to keep going when those situations happen, because they will happen. And that's super important. I think the second one, which was really big for me, is really learning how to adapt. My dad, my military dad, used to always say adapt and overcome. Like I heard that so much. But in other words, it means like combating an old age problem. Like instead of combating it head on as a one-man band, which that's not going to do anything but cause frustration, resentment, and can ultimately get you stuck. You have to be able to invest like a lot of energy and time and energy into like these, instead of into these hateful, hurtful situations. You need to invest it into something that benefits you as an individual. And so basically you turning that negative energy around and giving it to you and investing into yourself. I always say, you know, when I was at CSU, the whole time it was about building my own brand, building my own brand, building my own brand. And when you make it about yourself, what it ultimately does, it inspires others around you, those that look like you and those that don't look like you. And I found that to be extremely beneficial to my continued growth and development as a student and now as a professional. I still follow those same principles. And I'll probably say last, just kind of staying focused on the mission and making everybody else catch up. That's kind of my advice. You kind of put your head down, and you just stay focused. Dr. Jackson referenced athletics, and I can definitely concur with him on that. But the theme of it is you have days that suck. We call them 2 days when you're out there and it's hot, and it's early and it's hot, and you just got to grind through it. You know, and it's kind of the same way. And I love what Dr. Frazier said earlier. Even as you continue to go through this thing and you continue to develop and you continue to grow and you continue to make a name for yourself and build your brand, sometimes it just don't stop, and you have to be prepared to keep adapting and overcoming.
Excellent. Cheyenne, did you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say that I think it's like really unfortunate that minorities even have to kind of prepare themselves before even entering these spaces. Kind of like make a mental note, like, okay, like here I'm going. Like, it's really unfortunate that we even have to do this work. But I personally, I like to remind myself that I belong here just as much as the next person. I did the work to get me where I am. No one else did that. I did that. And no one can take that away from me. I just kind of like to remind myself, like, even if I walk into a classroom and people are making comments about whatever the lecture material is or about me or just racial jokes in general, you know, I just like to remind myself, like, you know what, no matter what they say, I did the work. I deserve to be here and no one can take that from me. But I also like to kind of find, as Jay had mentioned, someone who I can talk to or like a mentor. I don't think we should have to go through this alone, period. It's we definitely need, like, if I'm taking class now, I like to reach out to professors, kind of establish myself and kind of build this relationship where I can come to them and confidently trust that they will do the right thing in these situations. But yeah, like, I should be able to express these concerns to my bosses, my faculty, research mentors, all of these. So I also really agree that finding someone who is in your corner and won't just tell you to ignore it or let it go. They're just being bullies. Like that is very key and something that I do in all my settings, class, new jobs, research. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Well, I see that Deb put in the chat the next session that talks about mentorship, and that's really key, is to find a mentor, but also just be mindful that it's work. You know, I will say this, you know, working with students within LSM, finding the mentor, getting the connections are key, but also knowing that you have to do the work. You have to put the time in studying. You have to put the time in being prepared. You have to make sure you talk to other students, creating. It can't be personal. A lot of times what happens when racism or different aspects, we talked about it last week, we start feeling those anxious feeling like I don't belong. But when we keep the goal in front of us, I don't care what comes, what may. You know, Dr. Frazier is my supervisor. And as I was on the road to that doctorate, she got some phone calls where I was just like, you know what? I'm out of here, you know. You know, people come or people go and things happen, but my vision, I can't let that just, you know, get in my way. I got to keep going. So being mindful as a minority student, you may come in at a disadvantage, but don't look at that. Sometimes you come in and you're fully prepared and you're ready to go. But if you feel like you're at a disadvantage, use that to your advantage to keep pushing, to keep going, because there's other students behind you and around you that need you there, that need to see you there. There's other faculty that want to support you as you navigate. One of the questions that came in, I want to make sure I pull some questions from the chat. You know, it says, what kept you standing through all the criticism and racist comments ever made you think to give up? Or was there ever a time that you wanted to give up? I'll take maybe one or two just for a few seconds for that question.
Yeah, I'll say definitely there were times where, you know, you just want to give up and you want to quit. But I always, again, you know, the mentor, or even if you don't have a, you know, besides a mentor, just have a good friend, somebody, a confidant who will be there for you and help you stay on your path. Because it can get really ugly. I never forget in graduate school when my faculty told me that they didn't expect me to be here that long. So when I was complaining about a grade that I had made on a test, and I'm like, really? This is what we're gonna do? So yeah, you just really have to remain confident. And like Dr. Williams said, stay focused, keep on your grind, because you know what you're here for. So you gotta let all of that go.
Excellent. Anyone else want to chime in on how you navigated criticism or racist comments?
One thing that worked for me, at least, I have siblings, and some of my parents went through college, or my parents did too. So being able to kind of share these similar experiences with them has helped quite a lot, kind of to keep me motivated. You know, like, yeah, people are going to say this and that and treat you bad, but you got to keep going. Like the motivation and having someone that close, like family members, really helps. And I know not everybody has that, but if you do, it is a really good resource. You know, and my sister is almost the same age as I am, and she's also in STEM. So we kind of just bounce off our frustrations. You know, sometimes when I can't go to a professor, I can't go to administrator, it's nice to even just have someone to vent to. So having all sorts of levels of this venting is really appreciated and really helpful, I think.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you may not be able to feel comfortable to go to, because it kind of falls in line with one of our questions. And I'm curious to, you know, hear your feedback where it talked about, you know, not what we want to say to non-minority professors or faculty or bosses that we have to interact with in order to, you know, what we want them to know to support us as, you know, minorities in STEM, or what we want to say. Sometimes that space is very difficult to navigate because you want that A and you don't want any problems, but how do you navigate that? How do you communicate that to them, you know, that something's going on, or what you want them to know that you're experiencing? And I know Jay's the first one on that one.
I thought you was throwing it back to Cheyenne for a second. No, if I had to tell something to non-minority professionals, I'm a firm believer in living life with purpose. I think that's huge. And when I say that, everything that we do has to have some intent or, intrinsic intent to better ourselves and better the people around us. And just so I say that to say, you recognize that each person has a finite window to play a part in somebody else's life. And when I say finite, because you may be a coworker for 2 months, you may build a lifelong lasting friendship, but each person has a window. And in that window, you can either inspire others, or you can spew toxic information. But what we don't realize a lot of times when we inspire others, we are being inspired. So it's not just, oh yeah, let me make room for minorities, but it's also, hey, how can I cultivate self-growth in myself? I think that's super, personally, I think it's super underrated. I think another thing I would probably say is, and I heard this from a friend of mine some time ago, a colleague of mine, is that the best leaders are always the ones that lead from the front. And so you first of all, recognizing that these things happen, but also being a person that's not afraid to jump in there and say, hey, let me listen for a second. How can I help navigate this? How can I understand? Or maybe if I don't understand, how can I at least have an open ear where I show the demeanor of embracing others that I might not be able to relate to, or don't look like me necessarily, or don't come from the same environment or culture that I come from. I think that goes a long way, and if that's as simple as, you guys having a lunch together and allowing that person to pick the spot, putting yourself in a challenging situation. I think that goes a long way, personally.
Excellent. Cheyenne, did you want to chime in?
I think that Jay made some really good points. I also think that, like, when speaking to a non-white professional or professor, faculty mentor, a lot of the times, sometimes they take it as it's an attack on them. Like when you come back for feedback, like, hey, I did in your class, I'm experiencing some things, and oftentimes they might not be so receptive to it. But I think trying to, I guess, like, approach them in, like Jay said, like taking it like lunch together, or making the setting pretty and like friendly or opening, I guess, is my approach. I don't want people to think that I'm attacking them or whatever, because sometimes people can feel that way. So yeah, I think just kind of trying to instill in these people, people of power, position, that it's not always an attack on you. It's providing feedback on how to make everyone welcome in your space. And yeah.
And I think also, just to add to that before we get to our final question here, final two questions, is just being mindful that it's okay as students, as faculty, wherever you are, it's important to have a voice, especially with the uptick in a lot of social justice issues. If we're not expressing ourselves and learning how to do that, there may be areas where you may not feel as comfortable, but if you're not having those conversations, and if you're not talking to your faculty, the first time you talk to your faculty shouldn't be the time that you have an issue. It should be, hey, how's it going? You're meeting with them ahead of time. But then when things come up that may be disturbing, they already have a relationship with you that you can talk to them and you feel comfortable talking to them, instead of just going, because sometimes, I hear it here, they go straight to the chair, but you never talk to the faculty member. And so now you have a faculty member like, what happened? I've never talked to you. Now the chair, who's their boss, is coming at them with an issue. So being mindful of the chain of command, and also being mindful that you need to build a relationship and a rapport, especially when you're going into the graduate level, because those faculty will be your faculty. Like in undergrad, you may see them every now and then, but then you move. But when you get to graduate school, those are your faculty. So if it doesn't work, figure it out. Go to lunch, talk to them. I want this to work, because you're with them for 4 or 5 years or even 6 years, and you have to navigate that space. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want, again, guys, jump into the chat with your questions. But I want to ask one question to everybody, and just to the panel, be mindful, a few seconds for a response. How can students and faculty, and I'm going to lead it with Ms. Little, talking about how can faculty or students advocate for social justice in the field of STEM? You know, how can they advocate, you know, now you have a social media platform, you're being, you know, forward in that. How can you navigate that to other students to encourage them?
I think that one thing that I took a big responsibility for when I first began my PhD program was that I already let the faculty know that my vision for not only getting my PhD was to also mentor other African American students who are potentially thinking about doing a PhD, has been in LSAM, wants to apply for the LSAM fellowship. Like I was really like, I knew that once I started my doctoral program, that it wasn't just about completing the degree, but also trying to bring other people along with me. So from the very beginning, when I first had classes, like when we had first lab, like my first lab session with, I think it was like the dean of my department, I just let him know I want to record everything that we're doing. And I told him the reason why, because he was just like, you guys, you millennials just want to record everything. I said, no, Dr. George, it's much deeper than that. I'm not trying to just record me doing cool stuff. The problem I had with myself was that when I was going on YouTube trying to figure out what I was really interested in, because, you know, you don't have that much opportunity to go shadow every person that you would love to like potentially, you know, find your career for. So I used to do a lot of YouTube searches about like, you know, vlogs about how it feels to be an embryologist, how it feels to be a scientist, how it feels to be a researcher. But every time I came across them, nobody ever looked like me. And then when I got into these research programs, I was the only person. I was the only Black person. So I really love how a lot of these just Black women and Black males are now coming up with platforms to, you know, engage with students on the undergrad level, because I wish I had that as an undergrad. So like when you're about to start, say you're about to start a master's program and you would have loved to see another student who looked just like you, take it upon yourself to do a little bit of like, you know, I know we're not very good at savvy at technology, but even just making a post on Instagram, you might not have a whole bunch of followers, but it's not for that. It's for other students to see other students doing the same thing like you. So you're not seeing as, oh, I'm about to make a whole bunch of money. That's not what it's for. It's for a passion. So I really encourage a lot of students, and even if you don't feel like, oh, I have all these degrees yet, and who cares? Just film the journey, write about your journey, blog about your journey, share it with other students, have conversations, do interviews, get to know other people who look like you that are in those positions, because I guarantee you most of them actually want to talk to students like you, you know? So yeah, that's my little take. Just make it a responsibility for advocating for other students.
Excellent. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
I was just going to say one way to advocate is to publicize the great science that minority scientists are doing, whether they're students or whatever it is. So put it everywhere you can find it, whether it be a press release, magazine, newspaper article, or whatever it is. Put as many Black and brown faces on your materials, social media, doesn't matter. Just put it out there so that you don't feel alone and let others know. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. I see Deb put in the chat the alumni LSAM Alumni Association, and we have several of our students that have joined that. But I think it's beneficial because they do mentorship and connections with other students. And there's nothing like a conversation with another student. We talk to faculty and staff, but if you're looking to go into graduate school, before you make that decision, I saw somebody say, how do I choose? You talk to other students that look like you or that you have a connection with, because they're going to be honest with you in navigating that process. Anyway, any other aspect of it, of how you advocate for social justice through the field of STEM?
I was just going to say one more thing. It's like once you get up in levels, you have to always go back and make sure you advocate for those coming behind you, because a lot of times, like I was talking about, these different policies and things that people do at universities, you got to try to find a way to help those that are coming through. And so I feel like as you get in these sort of positions, this is really important to always try to help as much as possible those students that are coming through.
And I'll also add, I know Dr. Frazier and I were looking at this last summer, but there's so much going on in social justice in terms of racial inequity, women inequity, all of those aspects. Put that in your research. Are you looking in that in your lab work or in the medicine that you're studying? Are you looking at minorities and how it impacts them? Are you looking at, you hear a lot of numbers in terms of COVID and how it's impacting minorities. What is true about that? What is false? Are you looking at those things when you're trying to figure out that research project to work on, or the drugs that there's a lot of concern of, the vaccine in the minority community? Are you looking at those things to advocate for, different areas and communicating? I saw a lot of scientists. I'm a member of a social organization, and a lot of the women that were scientists, they came to speak and advocate for different aspects of science. And it was beneficial because that was the research in the field that they were already working. Okay. Let's see here. Was there any other questions before we closed out? Or we want to close out with one question, but if there's any other questions, please put them in the chat. What is a hope that you all have in regards to STEM in the future? And when you look at race relations, what are your goals? What are your hopes? What do you want to see?
For me personally, in my department, I would love to see more African American students in our department, because I'm actually the last African American student to be accepted into my department. And you would think there's a lot of students that look like me at Howard College of Medicine, but in various different PhD programs, there's not a lot of us. It's actually my program is majority made of people from international students, like Saudi Arabia. They have different ties to different countries to send their students here to further education. But I would love to see more minority students in our PhD program, because I see a lot of my faculty, like, soon as they have a domestic student, they just kind of latch onto them, like, I want to mentor you and tell everybody about you, So I would love to help any students. If you guys are interested in any grad programs, if I'm of any service to you, please email me.
And you mentioned, because I know last year you talked about how some of the scholarships went to waste.
Yeah, the LSAM fellowship at Howard, actually, I was the only LSAM scholar that actually was in LSAM in undergrad that got the fellowship. Everyone else was picked because they did various summer research programs, but they didn't have a lot of LSAM scholars from undergrad that they wanted to give the fellowship to. So when I was talking to a lot of the other students, I was like, so you met every Saturday morning too? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you did tutoring, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, that's when I realized, I was like, wow, so I'm really the only person that can really represent, like, hey, I was in LSAM for 4 years, this is how it is. And they helped me throughout my entire college career.
Excellent. So, yeah. Our hopes for the future, in terms of diversity in STEM and equity.
Go ahead, Dr. Jackson.
Okay. Oh, well, my hope is to, I guess, and it's really directed towards some of the HBCUs, is to increase opportunities. I know when I came through, we had a lot of different programs, the MARC program, the MBRS program, NSF and NIH and other agencies. And a lot of those programs dried up. And probably because we're not at the table helping to make some of the decisions. We got to get at the table to make some of the decisions. And also, a lot of the HBCUs don't have the equipment that is the high tech. I'm not talking about cheap equipment. I'm talking about equipment that may cost $500,000 or something like that to train. I know when I came through, I had never seen some of the equipment. I only studied it, on paper, but I'd never seen or operated some of the equipment. So I had a lot of catching up to do when I got to Howard. I caught up and I, and did what I needed to do. But the HBCUs got to get some funding, some money. We got to get at the table where the decisions are made. Otherwise, this is going to continue forever.
I'll add to that too. I think a few things. As Nico said, I just hope to see more people of color involved in the STEM first and foremost, but also just I want to see other individuals as well. They're more aware that what diversity, what it offers to STEM, and how it actually cultivates growth, technological growth, fundamental, like personal growth, all of it. It just helps us all as individuals. And kind of what Dr. Jackson was saying, even more opportunities. I think that as we become more aware of what's going on, we start to see a lot of disparities in the level of opportunities that's provided. And so recognizing that and then addressing it. You have corporations that are well established, that there are organizations that give funding based off of certain requirements that the well-established organizations have been meeting. But that's in a lot of ways is very difficult for people of color that are now having an opportunity to open their own business and do their own thing to have these same opportunities because the standards are so rigid and well established. So just recognizing that, you know, doing things to promote growth for minorities and people of color.
Well, thank you so much, each of you, for your time today. We've reached the 7 o'clock hour. There are going to be some reflection questions that Deb just put into the chat. And there's also a survey to let us know. That feedback is very helpful as we move and navigate to that third session, the last and final session within racism and STEM. If you're wanting to know how as a professor do I navigate, how as a student do I navigate, you know, how as, you know, as someone that's interested in STEM or working with students in STEM, how do I navigate that to create a cohesive environment? Even within LSAMP coordinators, I know that there were several coordinators that reached out to me afterwards, but I think that it's important to know the how, not just to hear the negativity or the things that may be impactful, but how do I navigate this? How do I go forward is really important. So again, I want to thank our panelists for their time and their effort and their support and their words of wisdom. Definitely take these moments in. This doesn't happen often, you know. And when I look at some of the brochures of STEM conferences, I don't see conversations like this. So keep these conversations alive in your areas, on your campus. Be the courageous leaders and the courageous voice that you have to be in those spaces. It's going to be courageous. There's going to be errors. There's going to be moments where you're not sure, but just make sure that you're pushing toward a better place so that we can get there. I'm going to pass it back to, I think he's still on here.
I'm here with you.
Okay, okay, Brian. I'm going to pass it back to Brian to close us out, but thank you all so much.
Dr. Williams, thank you. And everyone, thank you guys so much. I want to reiterate what was just said, that, you know, this is special. The LSMRCE is willing to have these conversations. Also, your vulnerability and your honesty is important. It's a fine line that we dance with, trying to tell you the truth without scaring you. But the real reality is reality. This is something that you will have to endure at some point. It's inevitable because we haven't matured enough to not have to deal with this. So I appreciate everyone's honesty, yet also saying it in a way that doesn't discourage our students from pressing forward. So really great job. Guys, we're going to be right back here next Wednesday. I think Deb put the link for registration in the chat feature. And also don't forget to do our survey once this session is over tonight. We thank you guys again for sacrificing your time, and we look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday.
Here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Hey, and always, like we say, invite a friend to next week's session.
Excellent.
Thank you. And come back for part 3. Great job, everybody. Man, you guys did all that in 1 hour. I'm serious. Like, that was a lot of discussion in 1 hour.
2375.
And not even an hour, like 55 minutes.
That was great timing.
That was.
Now,
really
hold
good.
on. Miss Jackson, You're at Howard.
Mhm.
Do you know me?
Let me-
This is Brian Thomas.
Oh, I probably don't.
I'm trying to remember, like there's a young lady
Uh-huh.
that looks very similar to you that took a picture with my son at the LSAM conference a few years ago. And she
Oh
was at
my
Howard.
gosh, I probably did because I went to the LSAM conference I believe last year
In Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah, you took a do you
Oh,
remember?
yes.
I think I met you guys at the Cheesecake Factory.
Gonna be a computer scientist.
Yeah, were you guys at the Cheesecake Factory or something when I met you?
Yes.
So so y'all took a picture with my son, and I have used that picture as such an inspiration. I think I may have even put it on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about like I said, my son about 3 weeks, maybe 2 weekends ago, was like, Daddy, I'm ready to do some a science project today. And I'm like, you ready? He's like, yeah, I'm a scientist. And so he has a lab coat. He has a science. He has.
I love it.
He has everything. He has a science lab, and we use like baking soda, food coloring, and stuff like that.
It's okay.
And I just remember looking at you, and there was another young lady. She follows me on Instagram, and that picture with him, and I was like, one, this is an example. Two, you guys are at HBCU. Three, I'm like, these ladies could be my son's professors.
Oh, wow.
And that's why I do what I do. I've been speaking with STEM students for 10, 12 years now. And when our son was born, I realized, I said, wow, it's cool that I get to speak. It's cool that I have my business, whatever the case may be. But it's also awesome that I get to influence and impact those who are going to be educating my child.
That's right.
And y'all are going to be his professors.
Yeah, let me know if you guys are ever in the DC area, because I had the opportunity to take my little brother in my lab and work. He had like spent the whole day with me in the lab. So let me know, because I'm pretty sure with the person who I work with, he wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Yeah,
he remembers that. I showed him the picture. He's like, oh yeah, those are the scientist girls.
I'll see you at the next conference.
Y'all are such great examples. I mean, it's one of those things where you could, how a parent, we could tell our kids stuff, but seeing when they see it on the outside from others, it just means so much more. And Deb knows my kids were born. I'm sad y'all can't see my daughter, because she was born last year, but just my son was literally in my wife's belly at my second LSAM conference. So he literally has grown up in this environment.
Wow.
And from the professors, you guys, to the students, it's just what you guys are doing means a lot more to people that they don't even know. Like these students tonight, it's going to be 10 years from now when they realize how impactful some of the information you're sharing is.
That's right. That's right.
Because they some are facing it now, but some haven't. I always say thank you for your endurance too. You guys, just like a lot of people don't know, you could be smart, you can have a good network and all that stuff, but you better get some endurance in you.
That's right. Yes, sir.
This is a game of stamina.
Right.
and pain tolerance at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, high pain tolerance is really good.
I was down speaking in Arkansas, and this young man at an LSAM conference, he's like, Mr. Thomas, and he's like super profound. Mr. Thomas, can you tell me one thing that can make you great? I was like, oh, that's easy, young man. And I'm laughing. He's like, why are you laughing? I said, that's easy. I said, your ability to withstand pain.
Yes.
I mean, picture too, by the way.
You found the picture?
Yeah, is it this?
Is that you?
Yes.
No, that ain't
No,
my son.
I know.
Let me
Okay,
see.
so I have this and I use this picture exactly. And you were actually bent down and you were showing them things on your poster. And I use that in my slideshow for the conference impacts. And that is actually one of our advisory board members' sons.
Oh, that is so cool.
Let me see. I'm going to find this real quick.
I had so much fun with that conference because there were so many little kids just coming up and they were just asking really good questions and they were actually following along with what I was saying. And I was like really impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of it, you have to be impressed with yourself to be able to relay the
Oh,
message
yes.
in a way that they can understand it. So you got to give yourself credit too.
Thank you. Right. I'm used to getting beat down by my PhD, the faculty in my PhD program. So thank you. I applaud you for this compliment. You're like,
Let's
are you
see.
sure you're getting a PhD? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still not explaining it good.
Well, you know, it's different levels. So you got the PhD professional level, and then you got the kid level, and they want you to be able to do both.
Right. I'm like,
Deb,
wow,
I'm sorry. Deb, let me know if you got a text with a photo that came through. That might be you. I hope it's you. I'm sitting there having a whole conversation with you.
Yes, that's definitely yes. That's Dr. That's definitely Amy's little for sure. Oh my gosh, Jackson's so little.
Here, do a share screen, Deb.
But you sent it to me in text.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I guess I could do this turnaround thing. And actually, let's see.
Yeah.
Brian, you're breaking up. Here's a picture that I used at some of our promotional materials. And I know this isn't you, Miss Little, but it was another person from Howard.
Yeah,
and they're the same. Yep.
That is so cool. I didn't realize how many pictures we're taking at the conference either.
Yeah, we're stealth like that.
Aww, such a small world. I can't wait for the next conference.
Well, the next one's going to be virtual, which is going to be in October, and we definitely want everybody to come. Please come present, share your stuff, and we are going to have oral presentations for Bridge to the Doctorate students. So, so that's going to be in October 22nd to the 24th, the 2022. Which, let's cross fingers, we're going to be in person. That will be in Chicago somewhere.
Oh, okay.
That would be fun.
Awesome.
Well, thank you all so much. Brian, did you get that photo figured out? Maybe he jumped off. Anyways, thank you all so much. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. And please tell Dr. Williams, thank you so much. I think she had to jump off too.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you all.
Thank y'all. Bye.
Bye.